In 3, 2, and 1.
Yeah, so Green Day's not only is not the best band or in the East Bay scene at this time, they're not even the best band in this list.
I would agree with that, without a doubt. Welcome to episode 119 of Nerdery and Murdery.
Big 119, I'm Zig with your nerdery.
And I'm Geoffrey with your Murdery. Welcome to another week of the ups and the downs, the highs, the lows, the good and the bad, the nerd and the murd. I was going to tell you that after you did our Dario Argento episode, I did go watch Inferno. I enjoyed it.
It's beautiful, isn't
It
it?
is. Yeah, it really is. I mean, it's just like Suspiria. The colors and the overpowering music are just perfect for it. Just absolutely perfect with it.
Nice.
Then I also saw the Adam Project. That was a cool movie.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, the Adam Project.
That was really neat. I like Ryan Reynolds, so that was really cool.
I really like the Adam Project.
Going back to Inferno for a minute, just speaking about Inferno, actually, it reminded me. The word Inferno just always reminds me. One of my favorite books is Inferno by Larry Niven and Jerry Pournelle.
Oh yeah, where they revisit Dante's Inferno.
Yeah, I love it. I absolutely love that story, and I've always wanted a live action of that movie or of that book.
Mm-hmm.
I wish somebody would do it, and I know that there's an animated Inferno that's based, I believe, off the video game.
Okay.
That I may have to watch that. But I came across something that I'm interested in seeing, and it's a two-part movie, or it's two movies. I don't know if it's a two-parter or not. Where did I put it? It's called Along with the Gods.
Okay.
Let me Along with the Gods. There's two of them. Let me pull it up real quick. It's a Korean movie, Along with the Gods, The Two Worlds, and Along with the Gods, The Last 49 Days. And it's about hell. It's about hell. Yeah. It's a fantasy action film based on a webtoon series. And the first part is The Two Worlds. The second part is The Last 49 Days. And it's about a firefighter who dies in the line of duty and is escorted to the afterlife by three guardians.
I heard about this.
Yeah, so it looks really good. I think it's on Netflix. If it's not on Netflix, it's on Amazon Prime. But I'm definitely going to give these two a watch because I mean, it looked really good. So I'm very interested in that. So
yeah, I may have to check that out. That does look pretty good.
Yeah. So I was going to bring that up. So,
well, thank you, sir.
Sure, that's all I have. Do you have anything before we kick it off?
Well, okay, so we've been kicking around for, I think it's episode 123, our 5 favorite comedy movies, and I've changed my list like 10 times, but I think I finally got it locked in. I've got yours locked in. We're now waiting for Will, but I can tell you All About the Benjamins is not as good as Friday After Next. I'm going to say that controversial statement right now. Same production team, same guys in the movie, not as good. Not as funny.
Okay. I'll go with you on that. So I've given you my list. So
thank you, sir.
All right. Well, that's an upcoming episode, episode 123, I believe it is. So
123. Yes, sir.
Look forward to that. And with that, I'll let you take over on the nerdy side of the house.
Okay, this is part 2 of the East Bay indie scene, and I've labeled it East Bay Indie-Punkish. Because it's not really punk. It's well, I ended up becoming pop music. This scene kind of captured the world in the late 90s, early 2000s. Pop punk was everywhere between about 1998 and about 2005. Mm-hmm. But it began in the same places where the East Bay metal scene began. Berkeley, California, Oakland, Alameda County, which has got penal and or Pinole. Penal. Sorry, I'm 12 sometimes. And El Cerrito, stuff like that. So today we're going to be talking about Crimp Shrine, Operation Ivy, Green Day, Rancid, the Mr. T Experience, the Donnas, Jawbreaker, No Effects, Dance Hall Crashers, and the Lookouts. Before we get into that, we need to talk about some other things first because they're going to be coming up in the stories a lot. We need to talk about Maximum Rock and Roll, which was originally a Berkeley KPFA radio show, started in the late 70s. But it became a fanzine, and it was founded by Tim Yohannan. You're going to hear his name come up a lot. In 1982, as the newsprint booklet insert for a Not So Quiet on the Western Front compilation LP released on the then Dead Kennedys label Alternative Tentacles. This compilation includes 47 bands from Northern California and nearby areas. I have not, you know what, I probably ought to do that. I will find a copy of all of those songs that were on that album and kind of put them on there. They also, this same group also did a metal version, which is out there as well. And I probably ought to include that on our metalish album because, again, these guys were all operating out of the same area. But Tim Yohannan was real big in the founding of a lot of that stuff. I also want to talk about Aaron Comet Bus. His name is really Aaron Edwards, but he was born in Berkeley, California, and Comet Bus started writing a fanzine in 1981 with Jesse Michaels, later of Operation Ivy and Common Writer, and they started their own basically fanzine after Michaels moved to Pennsylvania in October of 1981. He became an active participant in the Gilman Street Project and is a founding member of Crimp Shrine, which is one of the bands we're going to talk about. So what Eric Comet Bus did, and Jesse Michaels, eventually just Eric Comet Bus by himself, was he would go to all of these shows with a little tape recorder and ask people questions, ask the band questions. But because he was always there and everywhere, people talked to him. So he has hours and hours and hours of tape documentation of this scene because Aaron Comet Bus is a researcher, ostensibly. And he was like 12 years old. Like he was the little kid who, they called him the annoying little kid who was always asking people questions, but he knew more about the scene than anybody else. Aaron Comet Bus eventually forms his own band, Crimp Shrine, which is in our list, and then goes on to form another band called Pinhead Gunpowder, which included Sarah Kirsch, who was replaced by Jason White, Bill Schneider, and Billy Joe Armstrong of Green Day. He toured as a roadie for Green Day for many years and played drums on a few shows after their original drummer, John Kiffmeyer, left. And then Aaron Comet Bus basically gets tired of the scene because he goes from the time he's like 12 to like 24, and he goes to Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and opens up a used and rare bookstore, and now he has 3 of them, and that's what he does for a living now and has for years. Every once in a while they'll get him to talk about this indie scene, but he's so wrapped up in rare books now that, like, in our YouTube playlist I have included a documentary about the East Bay punk scene. Aaron Comet Bus isn't in it, but everybody talks about him, and there's archival footage. But he's not in it because he didn't have time because he's too busy running his bookstores. I also want to talk about 924 Gilman Street. I realize this is a lot. I'm almost to the end of it. The Alternative Music Foundation, located at 924 Gilman Street, referred to by its fans simply as Gilman, is a nonprofit, all ages, collectively organized music club. It's located in the West Berkeley area of Berkeley, California, about a mile and a half west of the North Berkeley BART station. Gilman is mostly associated with being the springboard for the 90s punk revival led by bands like Green Day, Operation Ivy, Rancid, AFI, and The Offspring, who came up from Southern California to play there because they could play there without getting into any trouble. Gilman showcased mostly punk rock, specifically pop punk and hardcore punk acts, as well as heavy metal, industrial metal, grindcore, ska punk, and more recently hip hop. Um, so in 1984, that Maximum Rock and Roll magazine, founded by Tim Yohannan, began thinking about establishing an all ages music scene because a lot of the young kids couldn't get into some of the clubs they were playing. So he rented out a derelict space and formed this collective. And those people went in and basically learned construction and made this club. They signed the lease in April of 1986, and the very first show was December 31st, 1986. They had a New Year's Eve show. And like
I remember when there was a club I couldn't get into because I was underage, and I don't remember the name of the club. It was in Deep Ellum, in the West End Marketplace,
uh-huh.
in the basement.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember the name of the club, but I was too young to get in, and it made me mad
Oh yeah.
because they had Blue Oyster Cult there,
Yeah.
and the tickets were like $5,
Alley
which
Cats. I
Alley
bet it was
Cats.
Alley
It
Cats.
may have
Yeah.
been, and I couldn't get in. It made me so mad.
Yeah, it was 21 and up.
Yeah,
Whereas you could go to Deep Ellum and yeah, you had to pay a higher cover charge, but it was 18 and up. Uh, but you had to pay like $10 to get in. Whereas if you were over 21, you paid five.
yeah.
But that's where you would get the black X on your hand to show that you couldn't buy drinks. Yeah, I think Dallas shot themselves in the foot a couple of times. Both.
Oh no, the name of the club was Dallas Alley.
Dallas Alley.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Dallas Alley. Yeah, but it was 21 and up.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, so these guys started this club at 924 Gilman Street, and it was for kids. And like in the punk rock movement in the mid to late 80s, there was a neo-Nazi movement that kind of moved in, not just in California, but all across the country. So a lot of the all ages clubs were watching for Nazi skinheads. Not all skinheads are Nazis, by the way. That's a distinction that people need to understand. The skinhead movement is actually a multicultural movement. There is a group of white supremacists and neo-Nazis that took that idea of the skinhead look and then basically started going to clubs and beating people up. But when you say skinheads, not all of them are Nazis. Most of them, as a matter of fact, are not. It's a music genre. It's a subculture. I always like to say that anytime we mention it. But 924 Gilman was looking to, because some of the clubs these kids were going to were getting overrun by these people. 924 Gilman stopped all that. They did not last long at 924 Gilman. They'd show up, they'd start making some noise, they'd get escorted out. But Gilman is where a lot of these guys started, and it's still going on today. They're a music collective. They're paid for by donations and entrance fees to get into the club, and it's going on today. It's a lot less hardcore than some of the stuff because Tim Yohannan was like, nobody needs to get permanently injured, but for going to a punk show. So at Gilman, their pit where everybody's doing the skank and slam dancing and all that stuff, whatever you want to call it. Sometimes they will bring in tricycles, and everybody just rides tricycles in a circle, or plays with silly string, or it's really, really kid friendly. Well, I say kid friendly, teenager friendly environment, and they have some really, really great music coming out of there. Lastly, I want to talk about Lookout Records It's an independent record label, initially based in Laytonville, California, and later in Berkeley, and it focused on the punk rock stuff. It's best known for having released Operation Ivy's only album, Energy, and Green Day's first two albums, 39 Smooth and Kerplunk. It was originally founded by Larry Livermore, who was the other person who was really, really big in this scene. He lived in this place called Laytonville, which was kind of up in the mountains outside of the East Bay. You got the wine country because you want to grow those grapes up on a hill. Just above them is a mountain community, which is where Larry Livermore lived. His name is not actually Larry Livermore. He changed his name to sound like the atomic testing place, the Livermore rocket testing place, because he thought it was funny. Anyway, so he moves into this community and he starts making music. Well, this little kid who lives on the other side of the mountain starts riding up there on his three-wheeler, and he makes the little kid his drummer for his band because the little kid's always there. And they become friends, and he starts taking him into 924 Gilman because it was around at that point. The little kid ends up getting a stage name, and his stage name was Trey Cool of Green Day. But he was like 14 when he hooked up with Larry Livermore, and Larry Livermore just liked his energy because he was a sweet little kid. So having said all that, sorry, again, there was a big lead up. Let's talk about this list. The first band is Crimpshrine, which was formed by a bunch of kids. The name of the song is Another Day. It was started by Jesse Michaels, who later on went on to start Operation Ivy, and Aaron Comet Bus. They were both 13 when they started this band. They eventually recruited Jeff Ott, who was 12, and they started in 1984. Ott began experimenting with playing synthesizers, piano, and a man named Isaac joined on violin, and Tim Armstrong, then known as just Lint, played bass for a brief period of time. Crimpshrine, actually, they recorded in 1984, 1985. I don't think the album actually got released until October of 86. But on that release, they decided to go on a tour. They took this old bus. They made it all the way to Florida. The bus broke down, and they had a hard time getting back home, and that's when the band broke up. But this is Crimpshrine. These kids, who again were, when they first started, 13, 14, 12, recorded their own album, made their own songs, and basically used instruments. Because everybody always said Crimpshrine, they can't afford instruments. They can't afford good stuff. So the recordings are not great, and I'm sorry about that, but the song itself is great. What did you think about Crimpshrine?
Yeah, I actually hated this one a lot.
Crimpshrine?
Yeah, stab me in the eye. I hated this song.
Okay, so do you think it might be because the recording is just not great? Because it's not.
Maybe. I don't know. To me, there wasn't anything redeeming for this song. I didn't like it.
You didn't like it at all?
Nope.
I like Crimpshrine. I think they're great, but again, it's hard to find decent recordings of them. You might want to go out and try it, find it on vinyl. It's out there, but it's not necessarily on the internet because they didn't do very well. The band that came after Crimpshrine, it is the next one we're going to talk about. Operation Ivy is considered the penultimate band of that genre. Operation Ivy is an American punk rock band formed in Berkeley, California, formed in May of 1987, and they were critical to the emergence of Lookout Records, the so-called East Bay sound. The band's name is derived from Operation Ivy series of nuclear tests in 1952, and although the band released just one full-length album, Energy, before breaking up in May of 1989, Operation Ivy is well remembered as the direct antecedent to a popular band, Rancid, which most of the members of Operation Ivy went and formed Rancid. The band consisted of Jesse Michaels, Tim Lint Armstrong, Matt McCall Freeman, and Dave Mello on drums. Prior to the formation of Op Ivy, Armstrong and Freeman had played together in Berkeley ska punk band Basic Radio. Operation Ivy's first live performance was on May 27th, 1987, in Dave Mello's garage. The next day began a tradition of performing at Berkeley's Punk Collective Center, 924 Gilman. The house band for 924 Gilman was Op Ivy. That's what everybody calls them. If you ask Billy Joe Armstrong today what was the best band out of there, he'd say Op Ivy. Without batting an eye. I've seen him do it. He's like, we were okay. We weren't Op Ivy. What did you think about Sound System? Because that's the one everybody knows. It's not even my favorite Op Ivy song. My favorite Op Ivy song is Edgecore, but again, it's hard to get a good recording of it. What did you think about Sound System?
I thought this was a decent song. It wouldn't hit my playlist. This was really kind of the first song in this two-parter episode and multiple songs where I didn't just hate it. So yeah. So I thought it was a decent song. Not bad.
Not bad, but yeah, Sound System. Oh God. I use it a lot in our TikToks just because I like the beat of it. I think it's really great. The next song is by Green Day. It is off of their first or their second studio album, Kerplunk, which was still an indie album. For years, I didn't know the name of this song. I had it on a tape I recorded off of the radio. I just happened to be recording a song and caught this one because I was making a mixtape, and I had it for years and years and years. I would have to fix that tape and record it on something. Eventually, the copy got so bad you couldn't listen to it because I had to copy it and copy it and copy it. But I didn't know who it was for a long time. And when Green Day came along, I'm like, man, these guys sound really kind of familiar. I can't believe I didn't have their first album, Kerplunk. I had Dookie. I think Kerplunk is stronger than Dookie. There are a couple of songs that are on both albums. This is just a little track.
Yeah. Kerplunk, Dookie.
Kerplunk, Dookie. Yeah, you get it? Yeah, Kerplunk, Dookie. Kerplunk is, oh my God. Kerplunk for a long time was the biggest selling indie album of all time. But Lookout Records couldn't keep up with it. It's like a lot of those indie record companies. Once they get beyond 100,000 copies, they have a hard time getting more than that out, And Lookout Records, I want to say Kerplunk ended up selling like 2 million copies, but it took forever because they'd print a bunch, they'd sell them all out, then they'd have to print up some more and then sell them all out, and because they don't have the facilities of major labels. This is at the time when Green Day went to the major label and made Dookie. 924 Gilman, the music collective, they lost a lot of fans with those guys when they did that. A lot of those people cursed the name of Green Day from then on, which I don't think is necessarily fair. They were selling records, but they weren't really getting paid for it because, again, Lookout Records couldn't keep up with it. So they made this debut because the major labels came calling, especially after everything that had happened in Seattle just a couple of years before. They're watching this independent record outsell all of the other independent records that were released. So the major labels came calling, and Green Day kind of really, they struggled. They struggled with this. As a matter of fact, what's the song that they did on their second album? I Hope You Have the Time of Your Life. Another turning point, a fork stuck in the road.
Got me.
Yeah, it's about them not understanding the vitriol they got from Gilman because these guys grew up in that scene. And again, I understand why they did it. It's kind of hard when you're like 18, 19 years old and someone hands you a check for $500,000 to say no, especially since these guys were all poor kids. Trey Cool was probably the wealthiest of them, but Billy Joe Armstrong and Mike Dirnt, they grew up poor, and so it's hard to turn down a $500,000 check. You know what I mean? Especially when you don't have a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of. So,
Sure.
yeah, I understand why they did it. But yeah, this song, I'm sorry, Dominated Love Slave by Green Day. What did you think about this one?
I've never been a fan of Green Day,
Oh, okay.
and this one didn't make me change my mind. I thought this was a dumb song. I thought it sounded like it came straight out of Deliverance.
Yeah, I think that was kind of the idea. I think it's Trey Cool singing on it too.
Yeah, didn't like it.
Okay, the next song is Rancid, Ruby Soho, which was their big hit. They were a punk rock band formed in Berkeley, California in 1991. It was founded by Tim Armstrong and Matt Freeman, both from Operation Ivy. Rancid is often credited, along with Green Day and The Offspring, as being among the wave of bands that revived mainstream interest in punk rock and roll in the U.S. in the mid 90s. In its over 32-year career, Rancid has retained much of its original fan base, most of which was connected to its underground musical roots. Rancid has had 2 lineup changes since its inception, with Tim Armstrong and Matt Freeman being the only continuous members. The current lineup consists of Armstrong on guitar and vocals, Freeman on bass and vocals, Lars Friedrichsen on guitar and vocals, and Brandon Steckert on drums. The band was formed by Armstrong, Freeman, and former drummer Brett Reed, who left the band in 2006 and was replaced by Steckert. The lineup recorded the first album with Fredrickson joining the band on the subsequent tour. The name of the album is And the Wolves Came Out. It is the 3rd album by Rancid, and it was released on August 22nd, 1995 through Epitaph Records, which also is again, it's kind of a major label, but at the time it wasn't a major label. The song is Ruby Soho, and it's the one that they're most known for. What did you think about Ruby Soho?
I thought this one had a good opening. I like this song. This is finally one I was able to listen to without needing to saw off my own foot. So I thought this was a good pick. This was a good song overall.
I really like Rancid. I actually prefer Time Bomb off the same album better, but I thought Ruby Soho was a little more indicative of the sound. Um, the next song is by the Mr. T Experience. She's no rocket scientist.
Do you know that Mr. T went to Dunbar High School?
Yes, he did. I posted a picture of it the other day.
Maybe that's where I saw it, because I saw it like just this week, and I was like, "Really? He went to Dunbar?"
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think he graduated from Dunbar.
Interesting.
Yep.
Yeah, he did graduate from Dunbar, and then he went to Prairie View A&M, where I believe he was expelled.
Mr. T is a homeboy, straight up, and I love that. That's probably why I liked him so much. You know, people from Fort Worth are just cool. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
But yeah, the next one is the Mr. T Experience, and she's no rocket scientists. The Mr. T Experience was one of those bands that was real big in this scene. They're sometimes abbreviated as MTX. Again, right out of that 924 Gilman sound, and recorded on Lookout Records. They've released all of their albums since 1990. They're still making records, but they're still kind of indie. This is kind of an earlier one. I really liked it. The album's title refers to its cover art, which shows the 4 band members depicted using a light, bright toy. And the name of the album is Making Things with Light. And the song is She's No Rocket Scientist, and it's got a lot of humor in it because that's what the Mr. T Experience does. What did you think about this one?
Nope, too punk.
Too punk?
Too punk for me.
A little too much?
Yep.
Yeah, you might try some of their later stuff. It's a little more poppy. The next band I want to talk about is the Donnas. The Donnas, they're actually from a little further out. They're from Palo Alto. So not really East Bay area. They're from a little further out. But they were enamored by the sound. They're also quite a bit younger than a lot of these people by about 10 years. But the Donnas were interested in both the sounds coming from the East Bay, so they actually started 2 bands. The Electrocutes, which were the metal band, and the Donnas, which were the pop punk band. Eventually, they just merged those two sounds and called themselves the Donnas. But in 1993, they formed the Donnas, as well as the Electrocutes, while they were all in high school. It consisted of Brett Anderson, Allison Roberts, Maya Ford, and Tori Castellano. Amy Cesari replaced Castellano, who left the band in 2009 because she got tendonitis. They drew inspiration from the Ramones, the Runaways, Girl School, AC/DC, Bachman Turner Overdrive, and Kiss. It's more kind of humor. They've had a cult following in the punk scenes of their 1997 debut. The band achieved major label commercial success in the early 2000s and afterwards as their music mixed punk and metal and classic rock sounds. All four founding members were born in 1979. So again, they're a lot younger than some of the people they're working with. They originally called themselves Raggedy Ann, and then they changed they decided they wanted to cover both the sounds, so they formed the Electrocutes and the Donnas, and the Electrocutes eventually went away. But their second album, American Teenage, had the song Rock and Roll Machine on it, and that's the one we did. It was released in 1998 through Lookout Records. It was also on the Jawbreaker soundtrack. And the producers of Jawbreaker were really into this music scene. As a matter of fact, they named the movie Jawbreaker after one of the bands we're going to talk about. But yeah, what did you think about Rock and Roll Machine by the Donnas?
I've always liked the Donnas, but I honestly, this wasn't a bad song, but I prefer "Too Bad About Your Girl," "Who Invited You," and "Take It Off." "Take It Off" is my favorite of theirs.
Yeah.
Way more than this song.
Yeah, I really like this band. I'm with you. I kind of like Take It Off a little better, but I wanted to showcase this song because it was more indicative of them trying to merge those two sounds, because you could hear it. You can hear that pop punk, and you can also hear that thrash metal. And Brett Anderson can sing.
Yeah.
Which is nice, because as we both pointed out, the thrash metal scene, none of them sing very well.
No.
The next song is by Jawbreaker. They were active from 86 to 96. The band is considered to be extremely influential in the 1990s emo and punk genres for their poetic take on hardcore. A lot of people thought of Jawbreaker as being an emo band, but really they came out of that 924 Gilman. Prior to forming Jawbreaker, Blake Schwarzenbach and Adam Fahler were childhood friends in Santa Monica and classmates at Crossroad High School. In 86, they moved to New York to attend New York University and decided to start a band. Seeking a bassist, they responded to a flyer. They started practicing at Giant Studios on 6th Avenue. But then their debut studio album was released in Unfun, was released in May of 1990 through Shredder Records, and Maximum Rock and Roll picked them up as being, this great band. So they ended up moving out to the East Bay area because that's where their audience was, and it ended up putting all their stuff through the Maximum Rock and Roll line. But this tune is called Want by Jawbreaker. What did you think about Want by Jawbreaker?
I liked how this one opens a whole bunch. This was another one I could listen to without having to chew through nails. So I liked it. It's a good song.
Good song. Yeah, I like Jawbreaker a lot. Their stuff later on is a little less harder edged, which is what a lot more people are familiar with. But I wanted to kind of showcase this sound where they were from California. They went to school in New York and decided to move back to California. The next one is No Effects, spelled capital NOFX. They're an American punk rock band formed in LA in '83 by bassist, lead vocalist Fat Mike, rhythm guitarist Eric Melvin, and drummer Eric Sandin. Sandin departed briefly in '85, only to rejoin the following year, and El Jefe joined the band in 1991 to play lead guitar and trumpet, rounding out their current lineup. So NoFX has been basically the same band since 1991. I have seen them live. They are incredible. They put on a great show. Fat Mike also has a band called Me First and the Gimme Gimmes that he's really big in. I've also seen them live. Me First and the Gimme Gimmes, they basically wear silver lame suits and cover songs from the American Songbook as punk rock songs. Their version of Jolene is incredible. It will make you scream and shout. But Fat Mike, okay, the reason they call Fat Mike is because he went, so he's from Southern California. He went to school and his band moved to Northern California to be around that pop punk scene because that's what music they were making. He came back from college and he put on like a freshman 20 and they started calling him Fat Mike, which is not nice.
Rude.
He is a bigger guy. But I mean, he's always been, he's beefy, he's a beefy dude. He's got broad shoulders. He like you got broad shoulders, my man. You're always going to have them broad shoulders and big hands. And Fat Mike also has big hands, but he's an incredible bass player because of it. So they release some of their albums on major labels, but mostly they do their albums through Fat Records, spelled FAT-WRECKORDS, so like a car wreck, Erds, which is the record company that Fat Mike and his wife started. This song is off of Punk in Drublic. My favorite one is actually the one before that, but I figured we'd get hate mail because the name of that album, Two Heaves of Bean and White Trash.
Wow.
Yeah, because it's two Jewish guys, a Hispanic guy, and a guy who grew up in a trailer park.
Wow.
Yeah, awful. But this one is called Punk in Drublic. It's basically the first a minor hit that they had. It's called Linoleum. What did you think about NoFX's Linoleum?
I thought there was too much speed in this song. It was too fast. It really to me, the song sounded like they were trying to rush through the recording because they had somewhere to go and didn't really want to stay and record something good.
That may have been the case.
Yeah.
That may have been the case. I think it's good, but yeah, I can see them going, yeah, we got to get this done because we got to go do a tour.
Yeah. I felt it. I felt they really rushed it on this.
They rushed it? Okay,
yeah.
So not a fan of Linoleum.
Nope.
Okay. The next one is by the Dance Hall Crashers. They were an American ska punk band formed in 1989 in Berkeley. They were initially founded by former Operation Ivy members Tim Armstrong and Matt Freeman, but Tim and Matt left. They got Elise Rogers and Karen Denicky on vocals. Originally, I think it was just Elise who was on vocals, and then they got Karen Denicky because they liked the sound of the two female vocals. And they basically took the band over, and Aaron Comet Bus moved to New York, Tim Armstrong and Matt Freeman went on to form Rancid, and then Aaron Comet Bus left to open his thing. They've released 4 studio albums, highlighted by the 1995 release Lockjaw, which featured the minor hit song Enough, produced by Rob Cavallo, and featured in the film Angus, which is a pretty big hit. The original incarnations of Dance Hall Crashers didn't go very long. They are heavily steeped in the 924 Gilman Street project. But they did make the Dance Hall Crashers Lost Again in 1990, which was their uh, their eponymous debut, which is where this comes from. Dancehall Crashers, Lost Again. Again, later on they were much bigger, but this basically encapsulates their sound. What did you think about Dancehall Crashers, Lost Again?
I'd listen to this one again. This was a good song. I really like this one.
Yeah, I think this is the best song in the list.
Hmm.
I'm gonna be honest. Um, I love these two. The two of them doing the vocals, and the fact that this was released in 1990. Listen to that song and think 1990. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. I've heard this sound before. No doubt. No Doubt, which released all their stuff in 1995, about 5 years later.
Hmm.
I'm not saying they ripped them off. I am saying if I were the Dancehall Crashers, I might want a little money from No Doubt. I love this one, and the band, their sound is just that ska, wicked guitar sound. It's fun. It's enjoyable, and an entire genre of music that captured the world in the late 90s and early 2000s. You could trace it right back to these guys and some of the stuff that they were doing along with Operation Ivy.
Hmm.
The last band in this list is the Lookouts. They were formed, or they were in existence from 85 to 1990. Just outside of Laytonville, California. Again, this is Larry Livermore. And the kid that lived across the mountain from him ended up being Trey Cool of Green Day. Larry Livermore wanted to start a punk band, and he had trouble finding members, citing the majority of local musicians being hippies and completely uninterested in the music he wanted to make. Eventually, Livermore recruited 14-year-old Kane Hansky. Kane Hansky, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right, is Trey Cool. No one calls him Kane Hansky anymore. I'm sorry, Frank Edwin Wright. Kane Hansky had another name. I apologize. And although he has never before played drums, Trey Cool showed an instant affinity for them. So they formed this band, and they couldn't get anybody to put their records out, so they put them out themselves. And that's when they formed Lookout Records, which is why by 1990, Larry Livermore stopped making records from his own band and just wanted to produce everybody else. So this song is by the Lookouts. It's called Story. I included it because it was important to include the Lookouts, because without them, most of these bands never would have got signed, because they started the record company, Lookout Records, that everybody signed with originally. What did you think about Story by the Lookouts?
I thought the music was okay, but they didn't record this one well. The music drowned out the singer.
No, they did not. And again, this was like their first attempt at producing. Later on, Kerplunk, these same people that were produced Kerplunk, which is amazing. Again, in your case, except for the last song, which you're not crazy about, but I love. But yeah, so I wanted to include them because they were important with establishing the scene. Them, Aaron Comet Bus, Tim Yohannan, and again, the guy at Ruthie's Inn, who played a lot of these bands in the late 80s, because the heavy metal bands were moving to bigger and bigger venues. But that's basically it for East Bay Indie, other than get out there and listen to it. Some of this stuff is amazing, even on the metal side.
I disagree.
But both of these two things were happening in the same place at the same time, and it's amazing how they were different and yet had some of the same players, some of the same people.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's about it for the East Bay Indie. I think the next indie we'll do is probably going to be Manchester, unless you want to do a hair metal one, and I can research on a hair metal one.
I always like hair bands, so
okay. Well, I'll try it on the hair metal and see how that got started.
Okay.
Cool.
I'm fairly familiar with how it got started, so yeah, sure, go ahead.
Cool. Cool. Yeah, I'm thinking LA. Right on. All right. Well, thank you very
Awesome.
much for going down both those trips with me.
No, no problem at all. Thanks for that. I didn't like the thrash metal.
Okay.
This list was a lot easier to swallow and listen to. So
I actually find that a little surprising. I thought you would have liked more of the thrash metal.
no, no, I'm not a fan of thrash and death metal. No, nope, 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 nope. All right. Well, with that, I'll take over on the murdery side of the house.
Murder.
For today, I got my information off All That's Interesting, Serial Killer Calendar, Wikipedia, and Murderpedia, and this is the story of Christine and Leah Pappin.
Christine and Leah Pappin.
Yes. So Christine and Leah Pappin were two French sisters who, as live-in maids, were convicted of murdering their employer's wife and daughter in Le Mans on February 2nd, 1933. There is going to be some French in here, some French names and places, and I apologize in advance that I'm probably going to murder the pronunciations. So the murder had a significant influence on French intellectuals such as Jean Genet, Jean-Paul Sartre, Simone de Beauvoir. Yes, thank you, Simone de Beauvoir, and Jacques Lacan, and was considered symbolic of class struggle by leftist polemicists. The case formed the basis of a number of publications, plays, and films, as well as essays, spoken words, songs, and artwork, and they committed one of the grisliest murders in the history of France. Christine and Leah Pappin were born in Le Mans to Clemence Dier and Gustave Pappin. While Clemence was dating Gustave, it was rumored she was having an affair with her employer. However, after she became pregnant, Gustave married her in October of 1901, and 5 months later, her first daughter, Emilia, was born. Suspecting that Clemence was still having an affair with her employer, Gustave found a new job in another city and announced that the family would move. And Clemence declared she would rather take her own life than leave Le Mans. And the marriage deteriorated, and Gustave began to drink heavily. Christine was born on March 8, 1905. However, her mother was considered not to be nurturing and deemed unsuitable for motherhood. Christine was given to her paternal aunt and uncle soon after birth, and she lived happily with them for the next 7 years. Leah was born on September 15th, 1911, and was given to her maternal uncle, with whom she remained until he died. In 1912, when Emilia was 9 or 10 years old, it was alleged that Gustave had raped her. Clemence believed that Emilia had been seduced by her father and sent her to the Bon Pasteur Catholic orphanage, which was known for its discipline. Soon after, Emilia was joined by Christine and Leah, who Clemence intended would remain at the orphanage until 15, when they could be employed. When they could be employed, and then Clemence and Gustave divorced in 1913. In 1918, Emilia decided to enter a convent, effectively ending her relations with her family, and as far as can be ascertained, she lived out the remainder of her life there. During Christine's time at the orphanage, she also received the calling to become a nun. Clemence forbade this, instead placing her in employment. Christine had been well trained in various household duties in the convent, easing her into becoming a live-in maid. Christine was described as a hard worker and a good cook who could be insubordinate, though, at times. Leah was described as quiet, introverted, and obedient, but was considered less intelligent than Christine. Employers were content with their work. However, Clemence was not satisfied with their pay and forced them to seek better paid opportunities. The sisters worked as maids in various Le Mans homes, and they preferred to work together whenever possible. In 1926, Christine and Leah found live-in positions as maids at 6 Rue Bruyere for the Lancelin family. Monsieur Rene Lancelin.
Oh shit! So all this is going on during the First World War.
Yes.
Oh god. Okay, I'm with you. Just trying to put a timeline on it.
No worries. Monsieur Rene Lancelin, a retired solicitor, his wife, Madame Leonie Lancelin, and their younger daughter, Genevieve, lived in the house. They did have an older daughter who was married away. After a few months of excellent service, Christine convinced Madame Lancelin to hire Leah as a chambermaid. The Pappin sisters dedicated their lives to working long days and doing their job, and by outside accounts, the family treated them well. They ate the same food as the family, they lived in a heated room, and were paid the standard wages of the time. Before the crimes, the professional comportment of the siblings was apparently excellent. In fact, the Lancelins were the envy of every French upper-class household for having such dedicated and hardworking domestic help. However, some years after Christine and Leah started working for the family, Madame Leonie developed depression, and the Pappins became the target of her mental illness. She began to scrutinize the cleaning and become critical of the job done. There were various occasions of Madame Lancelin's reportedly physically assaulting them, and the abuse worsened. At its peak, she would slam the sisters' heads against the wall. Also, neither of the women had ever spoken to Renee Lancelin in the entire 7 years that they worked there. The sisters were given orders by his wife, and even then, she only communicated through written directions. Leonie was also a woman that demanded perfection, as she routinely performed white glove tests on furniture to confirm that the furniture had been dusted. After 7 years at the Lancelin home, Leah had virtually no thoughts or ideas to distinct herself from Christine. The two sisters were remarkably alike in that they shared the same facial structure, hairstyle, and body style. Christine and Leah were seldom seen as two people, for Christine took away any differing qualities Leah once had. In 1929, a disagreement over money between Christine and her mother occurred, and Christine no longer visited her mother and refused Leah to go either. Clemence Pappin still wrote to her daughters, but the letters were ignored, and the two sisters now only went to mass or local parks on their half day off. Christine and Leah were now absolutely isolated except for the Lancelin family. On the evening of Thursday, February 2nd, 1933, Monsieur Lancelin was supposed to meet Madame Leonie and Genevieve for dinner at the home of a family friend. It was dark and it had been raining heavily all day, and Madame Leonie and Genevieve had been out shopping that day. When they returned home that afternoon, no lights were on in the house. The Pappin sisters explained to Madame Lancelin that the power outage had been caused by Christine urinating on a faulty iron. Interesting.
Urinating on a faulty iron?
Yeah.
Huh.
Madame Lancelin became irritated and attacked the sisters on the first floor landing. Christine lunged at Genevieve and gouged her eyes out. Leah joined in the struggle and attacked Madame Lancelin, gouging her eyes out as well as she was ordered by Christine. Christine ran downstairs to the kitchen, where she retrieved a knife and a hammer, and she brought both weapons upstairs, where the sisters continued their attack. At some point, one of the sisters grabbed a heavy pewter pitcher and used it to strike the heads of both the Lancelin women. Genevieve had come to her mother's defense and attacked Christine, and infuriated, Christine allegedly shouted, quote, "I'm going to massacre them." In the midst of the rage, they mutilated the buttocks and thighs of the victims, and in one final gruesome act, the sisters basted Leonie and her mother's with her daughter's menstruation blood.
Oh.
The murderesses cleaned themselves, locked every door in the house, lit one candle in their room, and waited for the inevitable. Sometime later, Monsieur Lancelin returned home to find the house dark. He assumed that his wife and daughter had left for the dinner party and proceeded to the party himself. When he arrived at his friend's home, he found that his family was not there. He returned back to the residence with his son-in-law at approximately 6:30 or 7 o'clock p.m., where they discovered the entire house still dark except for a light in the Pappin sisters' room. The front door was bolted shut from the inside, so they were unable to enter the house. The two men, of course, found this suspicious and went to a local police station to summon help from an officer. Together with the policeman, they returned to the Lancelin home, where the policeman made entry into the home by climbing over the garden wall. And once inside, he found the bodies of Madame Lancelin and their daughter Genevieve. They had both been bludgeoned and stabbed to the point of being unrecognizable. As I'd said before, Madame Lancelin's eyes had been gouged out, and they were found in the folds of the scarf around her neck. And one of Genevieve's eyes was found under her body, and another on the stairs at the other end of the hallway. Thinking that the Pappin sisters had met the same fate, the policeman continued upstairs, only to find the door to the Pappin sisters' room locked. After the officer knocked but received no response, he summoned a locksmith to open the door, and inside the room he found the Pappin sisters naked in bed together and a bloody hammer with hair still clinging to it on the chair nearby. The crime shocked and stunned the town of Le Mans. The sisters had a reputation for being good workers, quiet, who kept to themselves. They had no outside friends that anyone knew of, and their work references described them as honest, industrious, and proper. They had no criminal record, appeared to have no vices, and were regular churchgoers. Yet suddenly, without the slightest warning, these two quiet maids had turned into monsters. The citizens of Le Mans
Did they, though?
Yeah.
Was there no warning?
Yeah, not to the outside.
Okay, all right.
Because if you remember right, from the outside, everybody thought they had it great.
Yeah.
At this, the citizens of Le Mans didn't rest easy in their beds, most likely wondering which one of them might be the next victim of their servants.
I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. The sisters confessed to the murders immediately. However, they claimed they had been committed in self-defense, and overnight the two sisters became infamous. The public was inflamed in a way that rarely happens unless a particularly brutal and large-scale massacre takes place. The tabloids went berserk, calling the sisters colorful names like the monsters of Le Mans, the lambs who became wolves, and the raging sheep. Suddenly, the names of Christine and Leah Pappin were known throughout the land. Their trial was a national event attended by vast numbers of the public and the press. Police had to be called in to control the crowds outside the packed courthouse, and there were moments during the trial when the judge had to threaten to clear the court in order to control the emotional reactions of the people in the public gallery, particularly when the eye gouging was described. The sisters denied having a sexual relationship, but never made any attempt to deny the murders. During the trial, the sisters protected each other, and each confessed sole responsibility for the crimes committed, but the sisters ended up being placed in prison and separated from each other. Christine became extremely distressed because she could not see Leah, and in 1933, Christine's sanity was rapidly fading. She paced in her cell endlessly and began crying out for Leah. Her behavior was unprecedented, for her words and body language expressed a sexual need for her sister. She crawled around and ground her body on the floor, screaming and hollering as loud as she could for Leah. And then at one point, prison officials relented and allowed the two sisters to meet. Christine reportedly threw herself at Leah, unbuttoning her blouse and begging her to please say yes, suggesting an incestuous sexual relationship. In July of 1933, Christine experienced a fit or an episode in which she tried to gouge out her own eyes, and she had to be put in a straitjacket. The next day, she asked to see the police and amended her former statement that Leah had been involved in the killings. She claimed that she had acted alone and that her episode the previous day had been almost exactly the same as the day of the murder. Her statement suggested her violent manner in jail the night before was a direct correlation to that night in February. But Leah, intent on standing by Christine in court, insisted that she had committed the murder at the Lancelin home. The police and judge presiding over the case dismissed Christine's admission on the grounds that Christine was just trying to set Leah free. The sisters' chosen lawyer pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity on behalf of them. Christine and Leah demonstrated signs of mental illness, such as limiting eye contact and staring straight ahead, appearing to be in a daze. The court did appoint 3 doctors to administer psychological evaluations of the sisters to determine their mental state, and they concluded that the two had no mental disorders, and they deemed them sane and fit to stand trial. They also believed that Christine's affections for her sister was based on family ties and not an incestuous relationship, as others had suggested. However, during the September 1933 trial, medical testimony noted a history of mental illness in the family. Their uncle had died by suicide while their cousin was living in an asylum. The psychological community struggled and debated over a diagnosis for the sisters. But after much consideration, it was concluded that Christine and Leah suffered from shared paranoid disorder, which is believed to occur when groups or pairs of people are isolated from the world, developing paranoia in which one partner dominates the other.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and this was especially true of Leah because she was very meek, and her personality was overshadowed by the obstinate and dominant Christine. The symptoms of the shared paranoia psychosis does include hearing voices, a sense of persecution, the capability for inciting violence and perceived self-defense against imagined threats, as well as inappropriate expressions of sexuality. There you go.
There you go.
Those afflicted with paranoia often focus on a mother figure as a persecutor, and in this case, the persecutor was Madame Lancelin. In such states, one half of the pair will often dominate the other, as Christine dominated Leah. And paranoid schizophrenia can be difficult to diagnose, as the paranoid person can appear quite normal, which is how the sisters would have likely come across to the prosecution at their trial. After the trial, jurors took all of 40 minutes to determine the Pappin sisters were indeed guilty of the crime which they had been accused. Leah, thought to be under the influence of her older sister, was given a 10-year sentence. Christine, however, was initially sentenced to death at the guillotine, although that sentence was later commuted to life imprisonment. They were again separated for their imprisonment, and the separation from Leah proved to be too much for Christine. Her condition deteriorated rapidly once they were apart. She had written various letters pleading to be with Leah, however, her wish was never granted. She experienced bouts of depression and madness, eventually refusing to eat, and prison officials transferred her to a mental institution in Rennes, maybe, hoping that she would benefit from professional help. But still separated from Leah, she continued to starve herself until she died of wasting away on May 18th, 1937. Horrible way to die.
Ouch. Yeah.
Leah fared better than Christine, serving only 8 years of her 10-year sentence due to good behavior in prison. After her release in 1941, she lived in the town of Nantes, where she was joined by her mother. She assumed a false identity and earned a living as a hotel maid. Some accounts state that Leah died in 1982, but film producer Claude Ventura claims to have discovered Leah living in a hospice center in France in 2000.
Oh, wow.
While creating the film in, I can't pronounce this, so I'm going to say what it is in English, and that's In Search of the Pappin Sisters.
Okay.
The woman he claimed to be Leah had suffered a stroke when he had rendered her partially, which had rendered her partially paralyzed and unable to speak. And this woman died in 2001. Leah was interviewed, though, in 1966 by a French journalist from French Soir. She was described as a, quote, ghost of the past that has burnt until she is the color of ash.
Oof.
Leah admitted that she saw vivid apparitions of Christine visiting her in her room. Leah was convinced that the spirit of Christine was living in paradise or some sort of heaven, which she would be joined by, where she would be joined by Leah after death. Leah also kept a number of photos of Christine in a trunk containing all the dresses and memorabilia Christine and she had collected over the years they had spent together in the Lancelin home. The sisters are buried together in the cemetery Boutilliere in Nantes. Again, I can't pronounce French.
That's okay.
The play Les Bons by French writer Jean Genet often is thought to be based on the Pappin sisters, although he said that this was not the case. However, the play does deal with the plight of two French maids who resemble the Pappin sisters and highlights the dissatisfaction of the maids with their lot in life, which manifests in their hatred for the mistress. His interest in the crime of the Pappin sisters stemmed at least partially from his contempt for the middle classes, along with his understanding of how a murderer could glory in the infamy that came from the crime. The crime has continued to fascinate writers and filmmakers in France as well as other countries. Ruth Rendell has written a novel based on the crime, as have several others. 2 films were released in the last 10 years. An English film called Sister, My Sister, starring Jolie Redgrave and Jodie May, based on a play by the American playwright Wendy Kesselman, and a French film, again, I can't pronounce the French, but it's called Murderous Maids in English by filmmaker Jean-Pierre Denis.
That sounds awesome. I'm going to check that one out. I love that you speak French.
All right. Well, that is the story of the Pappin sisters.
Well, thank you very much, sir. I appreciate that. Man, what an awful time for that to be happening. What awful things to happen.
I know.
Yeah,
I know. I know.
maybe not treat, if you don't want to get murdered by having your eyes gouge out, maybe not treat people like garbage.
Right.
I'm just thinking. I'm not saying that what they did was right, but I'm saying I understand.
All right. Well, thanks for taking that journey with me. I'm trying not to sneeze right now. Ah,
Sneeze, do it, do it, do it,
ah.
sneeze.
No, I doubt I can now.
Okay.
So that'll take us to the end of another week of Nerdery and Murdery. We appreciate each and every one of you for staying with us. As always, you can find more information on our website, nerderyandmurdery.com, where you can find the links to everything we talked about, pictures, more information about the show. Plus, you can find the link on our front page to our YouTube page.
Yes, our YouTube page where we have listed all the songs, as well as this video will go at the end, and the documentary about that particular music scene in the East Bay is at the beginning. So if you just want to listen to the music, you can skip past that. But I would recommend watching that documentary because there's way more information than I was able to give in the time allotted.
Awesome. Awesome. Do appreciate that.
Thanks, sir.
You can also find on our website the link to our merchandise page, where if you wish to show off your Nerdery and Murdery fandom, please do consider purchasing some of the items we have for sale there. And you can also find the link to our Patreon, where if you wish to become a donor to the show, along with the merchandise, our patrons do help us keep up with the cost of the show. There are costs that are associated with keeping us on the air, so we do appreciate each and every one of you.
Please and thank you.
Please and thank you. And last but not least, please don't forget to leave a 5-star review wherever you can. It helps us and helps others find our content that may be looking to the things that we are discussing. So with that,
I have been Zig with your nerdery.
and I'm Geoffrey with your Murdery.
Cue the music.